Welcome to our podcast on political science research, where we dig into detailed analyses of electoral patterns and party dynamics. Let's kick off by discussing how spatial polarization was explored during the 2014 Romanian presidential election.
I'm excited, really intrigued, by the way geography played a role in electoral behavior, especially in a complex setting like Bucharest.
Absolutely. The study examined the spatial clustering of votes using spatial econometrics. They used GIS shapefile data and tools like GeoDA to compute, Moran's eye statistic, which ranges from -1 for dispersion to +1 for perfect clustering.
Got it.
They essentially mapped voting behaviors of candidates like Klaus Iohannis, Victor Ponta, and even Monica Macovei.
So in essence, the research showed that the voting patterns were not random, but basically organized around strong geographic clusters, right?
Yes, exactly. For instance, Iohannis and Ponta displayed high spatial autocorrelation. Their Moran's eye were both around 0.67 in the first round and 0.62 in the second. That indicates robust clustering. Voters in adjacent locations tended to share similar political preferences.
I find it fascinating that the same statistical tool can reveal underlying political divides, and it seems the study even employed local indicators of spatial association, like LISA, to pinpoint high-high or low-low clusters.
Right. And in that context, the Moran's scatter plots helped identify regions where high values, say, strong support areas for Iohannis, were adjacent to similar high values. Conversely, low clusters tended to form for opposition areas.
Makes sense.
This approach reinforced the idea of electoral polarization with two main poles. One liberal, with Iohannis and Macovei, and one center-left, led by Ponta and Tudor.
And these spatial clusters even paralleled national trends, if I understand correctly. The turnout statistics, when compared between Bucharest and the national level, further strengthened this polarized picture.
Precisely. They noticed that, in Bucharest, the increase in turnout between rounds signified that the underlying polarization elevated political engagement in specific areas. It's like, when people see a clear divide, they mobilize more.
That's a powerful insight, but let me ask, while the study found clear associations, do you think there might be factors the research didn't capture, like economic or cultural variables?
That's an interesting point. The paper argued that the spatial patterns mirror party roles as mediators between state and society. But I'd say, yes, economic and cultural variables could further nuance the explanation.
I see your point.
They did call for additional research that examines the variables linking the political system's structure with the electoral geography.
Shifting gears slightly, another study we're looking into discusses internal election manipulation within Romanian political parties. How does that tie in with this spatial analysis, if at all?
Great question. While the spatial study focuses on external electoral outcomes, the manipulation research delves into internal party dynamics. In that paper, the author analyzed fraudulent internal election practices within a small dissident party formation in Bucharest. They documented how a manipulator's team orchestrated internal elections to serve personal interests rather than true democracy.
That's disturbing. Right. So, internal manipulation techniques, like using loyal youth or controlling key positions by favoritism, become tools of patronage that ultimately reinforce established hierarchies.
Exactly. The study presented rich data with tables outlining age, gender, and even professional background of young party members. It demonstrated that, despite initial enthusiasm from youth, they were quickly sidelined when the party machinery favored their elders or trusted tools.
It's a classic example of political gatekeeping, and what's particularly interesting is that these internal manipulations, while distinct from external electoral outcomes, reflect similar polarization dynamics in a vertical structure. They affect how parties renew themselves and influence long-term political culture.
Absolutely. Exactly. The manipulation process is very systematic. Tools are assigned roles, like master manipulator, deputy, and even a tool number system to designate who controls which district. It's almost like a feudal network saving hierarchical power rather than encouraging genuine competitive politics.
I find it a bit troubling how the recruitment of youth was handled almost as if they were disposable assets, meant to secure a temporary advantage.
Yes, exactly. The research detailed that, despite an initial surge of enthusiasm, young members were used strategically to ensure predetermined election outcomes, and many eventually left the party disillusioned.
Yeah, that pattern definitely speaks volumes about the internal dynamics. Now, turning to another piece on our agenda, the article on de-democratization in Cambodia following the 1993 UN-sponsored elections. How do you see that fitting into our discussions?
Oh, that's a whole different yet, complementary arena. The Cambodian case examines how protest, which often fuels democratization, can ironically lead to de-democratization. After the 1993 relatively free elections, we see a transition where the ruling elite, particularly under Hun Sen, gradually undermined democratic processes.
Interesting twist. So, if I get it right, the argument here is that despite an initial breakthrough toward democracy with, say, a relatively free election, then widespread protest and contention created an opportunity structure that ironically allowed authoritarian practices to regain a hold.
Precisely. The article explores how factors such as the legacy of conflict, entrenched patron-client networks, and even the international community's ambiguous involvement provided a fertile ground for de-democratization. It's like, a double-edged sword. Protest intended as a democratic tool might backfire if the political system is unstable and the rulers use it to justify a crackdown.
Yeah, that's counterintuitive, isn't it? It definitely is. And the Cambodian case reinforces that democratization isn't a linear path. Sometimes the very mechanisms that propel change can be redirected to undermine democracy.
Exactly. The argument draws on theories of political opportunity structures. In Cambodia's case, the remnants of civil conflict and the absence of robust democratic institutions made it easier for the ruling CPP to consolidate power, even as international bodies like UNTAC initially helped organize elections.
The interplay between internal legacies and external influences is quite striking. And comparing that to Romania, it seems both countries experienced transitions where the remnants of past structures, be it spatial polarization or internal manipulations, played significant roles in shaping future political outcomes.
Correct. In Romania, spatial polarization illustrated how different geopolitical areas consistently favored particular political poles, while in internal party elections, manipulation underscored the difficulty of genuine internal renewal. In Cambodia, the protracted legacy of conflict and contested protest channels led to a rollback of democratic gains.
Yeah, it's like each case shows a different facet of how democracy can be fragile. I'd like to challenge one point here. Don't you think that, in some cases, internal manipulation might be partly a rational response to intense political competition rather than pure malfeasance?
That's a fair challenge. I mean, one could argue that in highly competitive party systems, some manipulation might be seen as a way to secure stability or unity. But the study clearly shows that such manipulation eventually discourages fresh talent and undermines internal reforms, which is problematic in the long run.
I see. So, while there might be a short-term logic to the system, it ultimately harms the party's evolution and broader democratic processes.
Correct. And that connects well to the Cambodian case. There, too, short-term stability was achieved at the expense of genuine democratic practices. The exhausting clash between groups, the endless protests, and the eventual consolidation of authoritarian habits show that de-democratization can thrive when democratic principles are never fully institutionalized.
Right. It's all about whether institutions can buffer the negative externalities of conflict and manipulation. Speaking of institutions, the Cambodian research also talks about external influences, particularly the role of the UN and international donors. What are your thoughts on that?
It's fascinating and a bit ironic that despite the UN's involvement through UNTAC, which was meant to foster democratization, the deep-rooted local networks and international misinterests ended up diluting its positive impact.
Yeah, that's
The
ironic
external
indeed.
pressure was, inconsistent. While Western powers and NGOs pushed for democratic reforms, they often overlooked the entrenched patronage systems that allowed de-democratization to occur.
So, in a sense, the international community's approach was half-hearted or even fragmented, which in turn allowed local elites to use protest and contention as tools of authoritarian reinforcement.
Exactly. And what's interesting here is the contrast with Romania, where external influences tended to shape reforms more directly through economic integration and EU accession efforts. The difference in international involvement is a key factor in why Cambodian democratization stalled while Romania, despite its own issues, continued moving toward more open political structures.
Absolutely. It's almost as if each political context, with its unique historical, cultural, and spatial dimensions, demands a tailored approach, and when those nuances aren't understood or intentionally ignored, the whole process gets undermined.
Yes, and that's a takeaway here. In both the spatial analysis of elections and the internal party dynamics, the underlying structures, whether geographic, social, or historical, profoundly influence democratic outcomes. It reminds us that democracy isn't just about free elections. It depends on resilient institutions and robust, transparent processes.
Exactly right. To wrap up, it seems that these diverse studies, from mapping electoral geography in Bucharest to uncovering manipulative internal practices and even examining de-democratization in Cambodia, collectively underscore how multi-layered and delicate democratic processes can be.
Absolutely. In each case, we see that factors like spatial polarization, internal power struggles, and international dynamics are all interlinked, and they all call for deeper, interdisciplinary research to really understand how to support democratic movements
Indeed.
reliably.
Thanks for that insightful discussion. I hope our listeners take away a stronger understanding of how political science uses methods like spatial analysis and case studies to reveal the hidden complexities within our political systems.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Remember, whether it's mapping electoral clusters in a city or uncovering behind-the-scenes party manipulations, politics is full of, layers waiting to be explored. Catch you next time.